Hey besties, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up, going through everything I read in the month of October. We have a nice large pile here of books. So I'll just start with some statistics from the month. I read 12 books in the month and then I had one soft DNF. Of these books, 10 of them were fantasy and 3 of them were romance books. So it was a fantasy heavy month, that's for sure. In total, I read 4,859 pages, a lot of pages, good month, and had an average rating of 4.42 stars. So overall, it was a really good reading month, I would say. I think everything but like one book was a 4 star or above. So really good. Okay, let's get into the first book. So I actually started off the month finishing Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This was a little bit outside of my comfort zone because I don't typically read like cozy fantasy. But overall, this one really surprised me. I gave it 3.5 star rating. I did really enjoy it. It took me a little bit to get into the book just because cozy fantasy is not too much my like typical cup of tea. However, I did really enjoy it. I really liked the dynamic between our two main characters. I thought it was really interesting. About the halfway point in the book, the story takes a bit of it changes dynamic a little bit. It takes a bit of a turn. And I was almost feeling like at times I was reading like a high fantasy book. So I was really surprised by that. And I really did enjoy the different layers to the story. I really like the dynamic between our two main characters, Emily and Wendell. I think the best way to describe it is it had a bit of, if you know Juden Carden from the Cruel Prince trilogy and that whole Folk of the Air world, they had a bit of a dynamic similar to those two, had a similar banter. I really liked their banter and the way their relationship progresses. It's really fascinating. This book reminded me a lot of Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. If you really enjoyed that, I highly recommend this book because they gave similar vibes in terms of the intensity of the story and the stakes and things like that. So, overall, it was a good book. I would definitely recommend, and I plan on continuing the series. So, okay, next up for the month of October, I read a fantasy ebook. It's called Reign of Cinders and Glass. I'll make sure to put it on the screen like here or something. It's essentially a Cinderella retelling, but with a vampire spin on it. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved the book. Even though you know the typical tale of Cinderella, it was still really fresh and had a lot of plot twists that I wasn't really expecting. I thought it was really well done, really well written, and it was such a fun fantasy romantasy, if you will. The romance in it was amazing, and I absolutely loved that. And I believe the next book is going to be like a Beauty and the Beast retelling with our main female character's sister. So I will definitely be reading that. Okay, next in the month of October, I actually read a book that was on my October TBR. One of the two books that I read for the month that were on my October TBR, and that is The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. This is the first book in, I think it's called The Hurricane Wars, like the series is called that. I think it's going to be a trilogy. In this, you're following, what was her name? In this, you're following Taliesin, and she's high in command in like the continent's army, their military services, and right now they're basically trying to protect themselves from being taken over by the enemy. And you're following her throughout her journey as she learns more about herself as well because she was orphaned when she was very young, so she doesn't know much in that. But this book took a turn that I just was never expecting. It was so much more than just being your typical romantasy and things like that. I also gave this book a 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved the plot. I thought the world building was super amazing, and I really enjoyed that. I think the reason it wasn't necessarily like a 5 stars is because there's a plot twist, a plot reveal that happens on page 100, and I guessed it after the first chapter. I guessed it on page 10 of the book. So there were some aspects that were predictable, but either way, I still really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend. It's almost giving a bit of Fourth Wing mixed with the Mortal Engines, if you know that. Just a little bit, not like entirely or anything, but either way, highly recommend. Absolutely love this book. We'll be continuing the series. Next up, continuing the purple book trend, we have Half Blood by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first book in the Covenant series. This is the new cover that they've just released recently this year. They've released all the books in new covers. In this, you're following Alex, who is half god descendant, in terms of the Greek gods. She's descended from a Greek god, but only half. She's a half blood, as the name of the book is. But 3 years prior, her mom basically took her and they went away into hiding and took her from the whole community that and the academy that she was training at. And this book starts with her mom being killed and her ending up back in that world and finding her place and learning more about herself. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I thought it was really intriguing. You could tell it was a YA book, but otherwise, I still really enjoyed it. I've heard people compare it to basically being like Vampire Academy, but with descendants of Greek gods instead of vampires. And from what I know of that world, I 100% agree. I think it is just like the same thing. However, I knew that going in and I wasn't mad about it. And I really enjoyed that. So, if you are fascinated at all by Greek mythology and stuff and want something set at like a training academy and that type of vibe, I would highly recommend this. I do plan on continuing the series. So, throughout all these next books, I was also reading a series at the same time. So I'll talk about the series after I talk about all the individual books because I'm just going to talk about that one all as a whole, and we'll get to that in a minute. So while I was reading the series, I read both No More Secrets and Fall into Temptation by Lucy Score. These are both part of the Blue Moon series. In the first book, you are following Summer, who works for a magazine, and I think she's an editor, if I remember correctly. But she goes to Blue Moon in order to do a piece on Carter, who runs like a family farm. And you're basically following her going to the small town, Blue Moon Bend, and her meeting the family. And it's a super cute romance book. This one was spicy, pretty spicy actually. Um, However, the second one was, in my opinion, spicier. So, yeah. I did give this one a 4 stars. I thought it was super cute, and I plan on continuing the series for sure. The second one, Fall into Temptation, I also gave a 4 stars. In this one, you're following Carter's brother, Beckett, and Beckett has a guest house that he's renting out, and Gianna Decker moves in there. She has 2 kids. She's trying to set up her life. I think she has a yoga studio. Yeah, she has a yoga studio. And she's just trying to like set up everything, get established in Blue Moon. And you're basically following them throughout the book. I do think this one was much spicier than the first one. And I it got really spicy at times. I kind of had to just like skim through some of it because this one does have a lot more spice in it, and it's also longer, so there's more opportunity for spice. But either way, still really enjoyed it. I plan on continuing this series. So now I'm going to talk about Breath of the Dragon. This is an ebook I got an early copy of. The book actually comes out in January, I believe, and this was my one DNF for the month. in this book, you're following this, I believe he's 17, he's 16 or 17, and you're following him through his journey after him and his father have been exiled from half the country. So the country is divided in half, and 10 years prior to the start of like the main plot, him and his father were exiled from that half of the country because they were practicing martial arts. And in that half, martial arts is forbidden. The half that they currently live on, martial arts is allowed and praised. And you're basically following this boy as he wants to become like the top martial artist for the country and basically prove himself. And his father doesn't want to. So he goes on a journey by himself. I read a few comments saying that this is very much like a love letter to martial arts and it's almost a bit inspired by Karate Kid, and I definitely could tell and see that through it. I think I went in with a completely different mindset, and not didn't really know much about what the book was about. And so I think I just was not at the right time to read that book and pick it up and fully enjoy it. So I did DNF it at 20% of the book. I didn't want to force my way through it because I think it would have put me into a book slump, and I really didn't want that to happen. I was enjoying it, but I think I need to wait some time and then pick it up eventually, like in the future, maybe when it comes out, and try it again and go in with a different mindset and see if I enjoy it more at that time. So for the time being, it's a DNF. Hopefully in the new year, I will be picking that up and trying again. So for the final romance read for the month, I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. This is the first book in the Dream Harbor series. Everyone is reading this, so I felt like I really needed to read this, and also it just sounded really cute. In this, you're following Jeannie, and she basically takes over the Pumpkin Spice Cafe as her aunt wants to retire and basically pass the cafe on to her. So she's trying to settle, she's integrating into the town, and then she meets Logan, who he is like the local farmer, but he's also like adored by the whole community. He had something really embarrassing happen some time prior, and so the community is really protective of him and stuff. But I thought this was a really cute, really fun, like fallish read, and I'm super excited to continue the rest of the series because I know what the second book is about, I know who it's about, and you get a little bit of glimpse of them in this book, so I'm really excited to read that. Highly recommend if you want something that's like fall-esque but aren't really sure what and want a romance. This was giving all the Hallmark vibes. All the Hallmark vibes, so highly recommend. I also forgot to say I gave this a 4 stars, so I really enjoyed it. Okay, so this next one was actually a book that it was one of the most recent ones I read, and it honestly surprised me so much. It was a fantasy. It's called The Coven by Harper L. Woods. This is a witchy fantasy, and you're basically following Willow, and she is a witch who has been in hiding with her mom and brother, and this, similarly to Half Blood, picks up right at her mother's death. Um, but basically, when that happens, the protections on her wear off, so she is no longer in secrecy. And the coven basically sends the headmaster of the witch university essentially to go fetch Willow and bring her back so she can train within their guidelines and reach her full potential, as she is the last living descendant of one of the founding bloodlines. So you follow that essentially as she's brought to the school and her time at the school. But you learn that Willow has some secrets, and so do a lot of other people. I was so surprised by how complex and how much I enjoyed this story. This book was such a pleasant surprise. When I first picked it up, I was expecting something a little more amateur and to not be as complex as it was. This is a story at the beginning, even in the author's note in the disclaimer, that this is a story where the villain gets the girl, and it definitely is. And I absolutely enjoyed this book so much more than I expected. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I was so surprised. And the last line of the book has one of the wildest plot twists I've ever experienced. I had only thought of the plot twist even being possible probably 10 pages before it happened. So the fact that it happened was insane to me and absolutely blew my mind. And I cannot wait to read the second book. This is part of just a duology, I believe. So I will probably be picking that up really soon and finishing off this duology because the cliffhanger was insane. So throughout that whole, I don't know, half those books that I read, throughout that time, I have been reading the Harry Potter series. I've read the first four books at the time of filming this wrap up. I'm just going to talk about these books as a whole. These books are 5-star reads for me. I absolutely adore the Harry Potter franchise. This is my first time reading the Harry Potter books in their entirety. I read the first book back in like middle school, so almost a decade ago. But the Harry Potter franchise has such a special place in my heart and I absolutely adore it. But I'm not going to go too in depth on these because I am filming a Harry Potter reading vlog. So if you want more in depth thoughts on each of the books, make sure to check that out. I'm hoping to have it out mid November. So stay on the lookout for that to where you can hear my in depth thoughts on these first four books. Currently in the fifth book. And then I'll finish up the next two at the beginning of November. So hopefully that'll be out mid November and you can enjoy that. So this has been all the books that I read in the month of October. As I said previously, it was an amazing reading month. I'm hoping that November is just as good. This is the most books I've read in many months, and it just felt really good to get through all of these and really dive into all these stories and stuff. So I'm hoping November will be just as good. I'm hoping in November I read more of my TBR than I did in this month. I only read 2 books on my TBR this month. However, I did read 4 books on my fall TBR. So that's a win. We're going to take our wins where we can. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, leave a comment if you have read any of these books and enjoyed any of them or didn't enjoy any of them. Let me know your thoughts on them and see if they aligned with any of my thoughts. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to stay up to date on all my YouTube content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.